So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight, taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, okay, boomer. Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, okay, boomer, to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he CO owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years, 8 months engaged. We've had our ups and downs, but for the most part things have been pretty great, until she moved in 6 months ago. We've been combining our lifestyles and finances, basically easing into merging our lives together. The problem is she's a people pleaser, in her own words. She's been in therapy for 6 years, and I guess I never knew how bad it was until moving in with her. A lot of which she's hidden from me. She recently was promoted into accounts payable at her company and realized she is the lowest paid person on payroll. She didn't negotiate a good starting wage, and has never asked for a raise, or had one, despite multiple promotions. She inherited a car a few months ago and sold it. She had offers online from $18,000 to $25,000. But sold it to the first person who showed up for $10,000. She caught someone stealing her bike at college. The woman stealing the bike managed to convince my fiancé that it was actually her bike and my fiancé just let her take it. Despite the fact that she caught the woman cutting her bike lock. Last spring was my 30th birthday and she ordered a giant chocolate cake for the party. The cake normally comes with nuts, but given my allergy for nuts she ordered it without them. Well, when she went to pick it up and it had nuts on it, she just paid for it and brought it home. I couldn't even be in the same room as the cake. Which brings us to tomorrow. My father recently passed away and I need to fly to the other end of the country to get things sorted out with family, attend the funeral, etc. Meanwhile, we recently had a pipe burst in our home, and the contractors will be out tomorrow to fix it. My flight's at 6 a.m. and my fiancé will have to handle it, including all the negotiations because we don't know the extent of the damages. I've been giving it a lot of thought and I just don't trust my fiancé to handle it. And if I can't trust or rely on her to do something like this, how can we really be life partners? I mean, I trust that she is always looking out for me and has my best interest at heart, but I can't trust her to get things done. We've talked about it a few times before, but it's been unproductive. She's convinced she's just being nice and doesn't like confrontation, then brings up examples of extremely confrontational people. I think she puts her aversion to conflict above her / our long-term goals, and she needs to find a happy medium. She doesn't understand how negatively this is impacting her life. But at the same time, we've had some amazing years together and she really is a great person. We're compatible in almost every other way. I'm a software engineer with a full-time job and a side hustle of doing freelance coding work in my own time. I've always been the type to have a side hustle I put a lot of my free time into. I get really bored sitting idle. My freelance hourly rates are $60 an hour, and at my full-time job, my hourly pay works out to about $40 an hour. So that's how I value my time. Anyway, over Christmas vacation, I was staying at my parents' house. My cousin was also staying over with her 3 young kids from Christmas to New Year's. I'd been planning on doing some work on my freelance projects when I had free time, in the mornings when my family had no plans. I wasn't in any rush, I was already ahead of schedule on them all, but I didn't really have anything else to do. It was in a really rural area and it's like an hour drive to the nearest anything. Then my cousin and her husband asked if I could babysit all day for 3 days so they could visit some friends in the area and hang out with just adults. I said I had planned on doing freelance work at the library, and she offered to pay me to babysit. I said I could if they got close to my freelance rates. She wanted a number, and although my freelance rates are $60, I didn't feel like that was right, it was high. But I didn't want to go too low. Honestly, babysitting 3 kids would be harder for me than the routine coding work I had for my freelance project. I don't know a lot about kids and I've never babysat for long, and I had a feeling it would be stressful and difficult. So I said $35, which is below what I make hourly at work, and what is the bare minimum I'd value my time for, if that time is spent doing difficult work. And she went crazy at me, saying that's a ridiculous rate for babysitting, that I was entitled and being selfish, that I'm trying to take advantage of how she didn't have other options, etc. I said that's way below what I'd be making if I had the time to do my own work, and I'd be putting off my own work to babysit. Her husband then got mad at me, saying that I was a 24-year-old girl, that I'm damn near a child myself, that my time is not worth that much and it's childish to say that it was, and that I was a stupid girl for not knowing that babysitting costs like $15 an hour. When I grew up and have kids of my own, I will see how stupid I was being. I was kind of done with being called stupid, so I just told them I hoped they could find someone else. My mom thinks that I asked for something offensive, and my cousin and her husband obviously did too. I am a 30-year-old male, and I got married 2 weeks ago. I was married before, but it ended after I found out that my older brother Thomas, 34 years old, got involved with my first wife. It was devastating because we were close and had a great relationship. I also helped him so much while he was struggling, and seeing how he repaid me hurts to this very day. I stopped talking to him and Mom and Dad forced me to keep it a secret, and because I was too weak to argue with them, I just kept my own distance. Then I met my now wife. My family loved and embraced her as their own. Mom and Dad treat her like a queen, which helped repair and solidified my relationship with them. However, as the wedding was approaching, they told me they expected me to invite Thomas. I of course refused, but they kept guilting me about what the relatives and other guests would think and say when they don't see Thomas there. I fought with them about it till the day of the wedding. Turned out they'd invited him behind my back, but I found out and stopped them in time. They came to the wedding looking pissed, asking what we were going to tell people when they ask about Thomas. I told them I'd take care of it. And what I did was take a moment while everyone was paying attention, grabbed the mic and flat out announced this and said, "The reason I didn't invite Thomas to my wedding is because I was worried he'd steal my now wife just like he stole the first one." I said it playfully to not make it sound so tense, but most of the guests looked shocked and started mumbling. Then it went awkwardly quiet for a moment. Then we moved on, but I saw Mom and Dad walk out while looking at me grudgingly. Later they started lashing out about how I just exposed Thomas and caused him to be shunned by the family in the most hideous of ways. I told them that I already said I didn't want him there, yet they tried to push him on me repeatedly, saying, "What are people going to say?" So I told them the reason why he wasn't there in a playful way, but they, the guests, still got the message. Mom started yelling about how everyone will now look down on and shun Thomas. She called me pathetic and cruel for still punishing him and gradually ruining his life despite him apologizing and trying to reconcile. But in my opinion, some things are just unforgivable. We've been on horrible terms since then. My wife said at least now they're off my back about what people would say about not inviting him.